Happy New Year. So here we are. The new year just began, and you probably have some goals in mind. So, first, thank you very much for the positive feedback regarding my last episode on New Year's resolutions. So, of course, I appreciate the compliments. However, please refrain from assuming or saying to others because I was tagged in a couple of social media postings where unfortunately then had to correct what people said because some people immediately jumped on the train and said, "Oh, you see, anyone can achieve anything. Niels Brabandt lost weight from there to there within just 6 months, etc." So, no, this is not possible for absolutely anyone. There can be medical contraindications, there can be complications, there can be different other aspects, genetics and whatnot else. It's not possible for anyone or everyone. So, very important is when we talk about goal setting, because most likely you will sit here and say, "Okay, we have a new year, and I've set a couple of goals," and you want to know how to achieve them. Of course. I am, I think, pretty reasonably okay-ish with setting my goals and actually achieving them. When you look at my CV, my LinkedIn, I think I achieved quite a couple of things. Coming from the very small village from where I am, I didn't get them served on a silver platter, so I couldn't say, "Oh, free enterprise, my family opened every single door." No, nothing. I grew up in a family of public servants in a very small village, disconnected from anything regarding free enterprise. And from there, I built what I built. However, it was not that this was one straight line and everything worked immediately. We're going to talk about professional goal setting because most likely you're sitting there and you have a couple of goals in mind and you want to know how to achieve them. And when it comes to goal setting, meanwhile, number 461, the 461st episode of this podcast, absolutely wild. Never expected that this is going to go anywhere near that. I started this during the pandemic at my kitchen table. So here we are. When we now talk about goal setting, it is very important that there is not just one way how to achieve goals. However, many people do really bad mistakes, often because they don't know any better. However, never listen to anyone because especially right now on Instagram, there are already many people around to tell you, "Oh, I have the secret for goal setting and my system." And then there's some fancy name for that system. The ACE. A is for absolute, C is for control, E is for environment. And it's just all nonsense. There is not one system for goal setting. There are certain commonalities that are scientifically proven that are going to work. And these are the ones that we're going to talk about today. What is the common ground of goal setting where you say this is something you have to do no matter what kind of goal you are setting? So let's talk about professional goal setting right from here. When we talk about professional goals, the number one thing you, of course, have to consider first is the context. There is not just one goal. Often you, for example, say, and that's the classic one that people present to me, especially in coaching at the beginning of the year. They often say, "Okay, look, I have this project at work and I want this to really go well to just drive my career forward." Very good. That's a very clearly defined aspect. And we always have to talk about the context. And the usual context at the beginning of the year is people have some sort of work project and they want to advance their career. When we talk about projects, you often have the feeling where you say, "Look, I'm doing pretty well with that, I think, but the others are a bit, nah, they are not so great." Some people even say they're a bit stupid. And hear the news. They will think the same about you in other contexts. The reason why you think that they're not doing that well with the project is the project is your highest priority. And anyone in their team who has the project as their highest priority will do reasonably well, hopefully, except when they are wildly incompetent, which happens from time to time, and then you have to deal with that. However, other people have other projects. So when you say project A is just my personal number one project, other people have that as their second, third, or 27th most important project, which is why they have it on a lower priority. And that, of course, means they won't deal with it on highest priority. And then you think they don't do that well. No, they don't do that well because they have other things on their plate. And they think the same about you in other contexts because they have project B. You have project A as your number one priority. They have project B, but you don't care about project B because it's only marginally tangible of tangible benefit for your department, your job, your position. It's also not held very highly on executive level, not important for your career. So immediately you behave differently. So never blame other people because you think they're all incompetent. They probably only have different priorities. But the number one usually is projects, followed by people saying, "Okay, in my organization, there are a couple of things to change. I'm the department lead or I'm part of a team that has to take care of that change." That's the organizational change. And of course, beginning of the year, the most common one, outside of the business world is personal goals. You say, I want to do X, Y, Z next year, and I want to do better with something. These are personal goals. Personal goals are the ones which are most relevant here. And when we now look at what do we need to do, there are certain variables you have to take care of at the very beginning when you set any kind of goal in the future. And when we talk about these variables, it means the number one thing is the definition. When you now say, oh, it's easy to define, right? I want to eat healthier. Yeah, and that is not a great definition. So I give you a very simple aspect of three main things you have to consider here. With the definition, you have OKRs, KPIs, CSFs. You probably heard at least one of these three. I know some people now say, oh, it's the beginning of the year and you're coming along with these business abbreviations already. Are you serious? Yes, I am, because they are important and they are backed by science. So OKRs, objectives and key results, KPIs, key performance indicators, CSFs is the last one. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. OKRs, you probably hear all the time now in the business world, objectives and key results. So what basically do you need to bring to the table to make the year a successful one, or the next quarter, or the next month, or the next week a successful one? The KPIs add on top of that or contribute toward these goals, because these are measurable outcomes. And very important is these measurable outcomes either are accepted measurable outcomes. Accepted means, for example, when you say we have to transport goods from A to B, probably your measurement that you use is kilometers or miles. When you say, oh, I think we have to produce that amount of pieces. Okay, here we are. Pieces. How many pieces do you have to produce? These are just accepted numbers, industry standards. There are certain units which are globally accepted, backed by science and clearly defined. However, often people start to create their own KPIs and then things go south from there. I give you an example from a German company. They had something which was called LQ, German for Leistungsquotient, basically meaning delivery quotient, basically the delivery index. How much do you contribute to the organization? And it was a KPI they made up by themselves. That is not by definition wrong. However, I asked, could I please see the formula behind it? And they showed the formula to me and I looked at it and said, you know, there's one aspect weighing in quite heavily, which pulls down the delivery index, and that's absence. But there's only one absence. It's a massive difference if people are absent due to family emergencies or a disease, an illness they have, or, for example, due to pregnancy, or if people just don't show up, or if they're just late. If they don't show up for work, there's a massive difference in that. How can you just, or paid vacation? There are massive differences in all of these aspects. How can you only have absence as one factor and then weighing in so heavily, bringing down the delivery index? And then this executive told me, Niels, there are only two states in this business here. You are either productive or you're non-productive. We have money earner and money burner, and you have to decide where you are. Where on the balance sheet do you want to end up as? And by the way, when you're a money burner, you won't be here for long. That's, of course, one way how to drive an organization. However, not a sustainable one, not a good one, and also not a very scientific one. It's basically made up nonsense, taking yourself way too seriously and way too important compared to the made-up number you just brought to the table. You cannot have KPIs which are not thoroughly checked and backed by science, and you need to back them by science. If you just made a random number saying it's so genius you have to follow, run as quickly as you can, because usually these people are making up the wildest stuff just to show you a number which is usually not backed by anything. And now we come to the important point. Numbers games are important. However, you cannot only run an organization based on numbers. I give you a very simple example. CSFs, the critical success factors, are the soft factors which are relevant to achieve your goal. And I give you an example from a personal goal and then a business goal. A personal goal, when I said I want to lose weight, and I had a very clear KPI. I was at 145 kilograms. I wanted to go down to below 100, 99.9 by Christmas, starting end of April. So I had 8 months time. I achieved 95 kilograms. That's 190 pounds. So I lost 55 kilograms, 110 pounds in 6 months time with none of these injections or Ozempic or whatever else, just by diet change and moving more without the gym. And that was these were soft prerequisites. One of these CSFs, the critical success factors. A soft factor was when I realized that my whole life means I always think of I am doing something which is just awful. If I get up every morning and say, I hate everything I eat, I hate everything I drink, the whole life is just a harrowing experience just to get to that weight. Then I told myself, if you get to that stage, I just drop the goal and I just live with the weight I have and face the consequences of that. I'm perfectly fine with that. And I was happy on all levels of weight, just to tell you that. It's very important that these soft factors are relevant. I give you an example. When you say, hey, we want to save 200,000 euros in our sales department. And then you restructure something and you change things. And due to these changes, people get demotivated and leave the organization. Also, team members get aggressive towards each other, so the whole atmosphere goes down. They put that on Glassdoor and Kununu, so there's an employer brand damage. Less people apply. You have to spend more on marketing. You have to spend more on recruiting. So you save 200,000 and spend 2 million on the other end to recruit people that actually replace the people who left due to your actions in the first place. While marketing spend and recruiting spend are KPIs clearly defined by the unit of currency. CSFs such as motivation, organizational culture, employee motivation, how do people deal with each other, ways of communication, employer branding. These are either impossible or very hard to measure. It's almost impossible. I often hear, oh yeah, we have an employer branding scale from 1 to 10. Usually when you look at these scales, it's almost made up. It's almost made up. Very rarely you can measure that coherently, consistently, and reliably and accurately. So here you are. The CSFs have to be fulfilled as well. When you say you have great OKRs, you have great objectives and key results, you have the great KPIs next to them, but you do not tick the box of CSFs, you most likely will fail in the mid to long run. You might achieve a short-term goal, but it's not going to be sustainable. So be sure about the fact that you need to also be on the safe side regarding the CSFs. When you are happy with that, and when you say, okay, I think I'm pretty sorted on that one. So by the way, one of the CSFs for me also was, I do not want to lose weight by going to the gym. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with gyms. Nothing wrong with gyms. They are proven by science, healthy. However, I know what kind of agenda I have during my business hours. And when I have time off, I really do not want to spend that time at the gym. Just a personal preference. And I told myself if I can only achieve the weight loss by going to the gym, I just drop the goal. That was also one of the CSFs. So here you are. You need to tick all three boxes. OKRs, objectives and key results, KPIs, the measurable numbers, CSF, the soft factors. When you have all of these three, then you get to the next one, and that's the duration. When it comes to duration, many people say, isn't that just wild guessing? Because usually you don't know how long to achieve. How long does it take until you can achieve that? Well, I looked into scientific evidence. How much weight can I lose? And when you have other projects, you can say, okay, comparable projects took how long? However, most people fail with putting in a right duration because they do not plan buffer time. And when you now say, and please don't, please don't, when you tell me, oh, Niels, we don't need buffers because we're agile. And, agile means we go really fast, and that means no buffer time, right? Yeah. Nonsense. Straightforward nonsense. Agile. So first, agile, usually when people tell me something about agile, they have no clue what they're talking about. Because often when I ask them, okay, agile methods, which ones do you use? And they say, yeah, agile, doing things really quickly. That has nothing to do with agile methods. Absolutely nothing. Agile does not mean doing things really quickly. It also doesn't mean that you lose structure or have no processes. Anyone is allowed to do anything. That's not agile. That's just chaos. So duration means you have to look into what will always happen. I give you a couple of things that will always happen. People will call in sick during the year. There will be some supplier that is going to deliver late. There will be goods that do not meet your quality criteria. There will be clients who simply move things forward or backward. And there will be clients who simply say, got the delivery, didn't like it, sending it back, please do it again. This will happen. And you can already calculate how much time this will take. The usual minimum you say today as a buffer time is 20%. And 20% is really, really, really tight. 20% fills up automatically only by things that happen during daily business life. And I now plan a project which is running for 2 years with 50% buffer time. And I know often people come along and say, what happens when you don't need the buffer time? Well, here are the news. News flash. We are finishing early then. And no one ever complained about that. Isn't it better that you say, hey, we planned for 23 months and we completed that in 21, rather than saying, oh, we complete that in 18 months and anyone knows, no, we won't. We definitely will not. Do you know these moments, especially in corporate settings or in business settings where you have a project plan, people take a look at it and anyone is looking at it saying, it's not going to work that way. We all know this is never going to be on time, but we all just put our thumbs up so we can finally leave the meeting room. It's not going to happen that way. What kind of planning is that? When did we start to celebrate ourselves for non-realistic planning and actually say that this is leadership work? Because hint, it's not. So the duration is extremely important. Put in the buffer time as you need it. And when you still say, yeah, are there any things which I should really take into consideration? Yes, and that's the third aspect. Always look at who is going to make decisions in due course of the process and who has the control over these decisions. Because we all know sometimes you have clients who say, oh, really good proposal. I think we need to have a think. And so the decision and the control is extremely important. When you say there is a decision, for example, you do something, you propose something to the board and you say, okay, I just need a go. I need a yes. I need a confirmation from the board. And then someone says, yeah, it's May now. We don't have a board meeting in June. The next one should be in July, but that's summer break. And then it's August, also summer break. The next one is in September. So here you are sitting in May and your next decision-making time is in September, and you don't even know if that's going to be a yes there. So the decision-making time is extremely important, where you need to know which decisions do I have control over, or at least influence, and which are the decisions that I don't have control over. And also, by the way, when you deliver something, who has the control to say this is delivered in the quality, quantity, and for the price that we actually expected? Because it's always possible that you deliver a result and suddenly your client or the general public simply says, that's not what we expected. And then you have to do all the work again. So here you are. The decision and control part tells you a lot about the duration. Be honest here. You have so much experience in your business. You definitely will know how to do that properly. So please do not pretend that you do not know what reality holds for you. So now how do we get all of this in place? When it comes to the implementation, very first step always is look at what is already there. And please don't, some people say there's nothing. First, I don't believe that. Usually there is something. If there's nothing, big advantage, you can start from the scratch. However, usually there is something. So do a check. What is already there? And the next one is always check what is the reality. When you say I'm setting goals, realistic goals are not enough. Ambitious goals are the way to go. However, you need to be ambitious, realistic. I give you a definition of what is the one and the other. When someone says ambitious, realistic, I just had one client last year who said, okay, at the moment we are selling an average 13 different times per year to any client. Next year, I want it to be 15. 15 transactions per client per year in average. And then people said, look, that's more than 10% more. How do we want to achieve that? And then he said, we're going deeper into online marketing. We're going to have an on-site sales team. We're going to have phone service in local language so you can call them, you can speak to your clients. So we have all these new channels to create more sales. And by the way, they ended up with 16.8. So they overachieved on the goal, got a massive bonus, the team, the leader, anyone very happy. What is not ambitious realistic is when another client example where someone says, okay, so at the moment we have 0.3% market share in this global industry, which is nice for a mid-sized business. I think we should head for 10% next year. And of course, anyone was just shaking their head. How do you want to get 30 times the amount? And then someone said, yeah, you just have to work hard. That's not ambitious. That's not ambitious realistic. That's just plain nonsense. That's just plain madness. You just want to torture people. Anyone will be demotivated from the beginning of the year because anyone knows we don't have to think about our annual bonus. We're not going to get it anyway. I give you an example of an international bank. They entered a new market, meaning they entered a new country. And what happened there was that the board expected 10% year-on-year growth. And when people said, how should we achieve that for next year? Because we already grew quite much, and 10% every year means it is in relative numbers, it's the same every year, but in absolute numbers, getting more and more every year. So how do we achieve that? Do we get online marketing? Do we get an on-site sales team? Are we allowed to drive to the clients more often and not limiting our on-site meeting numbers or anything like that? What are the measurements that we can put in place? What are the actual actions we are taking to get that done? What are the means we get to achieve this goal? And then the board member said, growth mindset. And this is an international bank, by the way. And immediately the whole room just collapsed and said, oh, good God, no, not this nonsense again. So first, there is a growth mindset and there's scientific evidence to that. Some people don't believe and there is a growth possible. And that's, of course, part of the problem. You need to have a growth mindset. You need to believe in the growth that is actually happening. However, you need to have the means to do it. When someone tells you, okay, look, there's a weight at the gym and it's 5 kilograms, you need to lift it, and you need to lift it 50, and you lift it 50 times, and then, okay, goal for next year is 5 tons, growth mindset. Then someone will say, that's not physically possible. Humans can't lift 5 tons, at least not at once, in one piece of steel. How? So be ambitious, because realistic goals are usually too little. And by the way, when people overachieve the goal, it usually says you're a really good motivator as well, because if you're not a good motivator, people achieve the goal and stop right there. So the example with the client transactions, when someone says, oh, we reached the 15 in October and they went to 16.8, that shows that this team lead was a really good motivator. So the ambitious, realistic aspect is extremely important. And that is something which will never end, follow up. When you say, oh, people just can't people just keep going? Why do I always have to follow up? This is so annoying. Let's face it, we are no different. Let's say you have to file your tax returns, and I give you, and I'm quoting this from an online training I had with Harvard University about law, where the professor asked the question, would you pay your taxes if no one puts you under any consequences? There will be no consequences when you don't pay your taxes. And he picked me to answer, and I said, of course I would pay my taxes. I want to have schools, want to have roads, want to have infrastructure, want to have fire protection, want to have police service. I want to have basically a society that works. And we need taxes for that. Of course I would pay that. And then he asked, would you pay the same amount if no one knows what amount you ever pay? And that's where you start thinking, isn't tax a bit high? Or maybe tax is okay? Who knows? Yeah. And that's exactly the point. The follow-up means you have to tell people, please keep going. Some people are very convinced of the goal and they will go by themselves. But many people say, look, I have time for 8 different projects. I have 12 on the table already, and you're at project number 13. And these people from the very beginning will follow one strategy. They will say, I will only take care of the projects where people are basically telling me you have to deliver. And when they don't get back to me, I will simply let the project drop and hope it never returns to my desk. So follow up, because that is simply part of the game. When you have any kind of project goals, organizational or personal goals, following up with them is always what makes things work. And when you then do it exactly the way we discussed today, your goal setting will be a massive success. I wish you all the best in the year 2026. Happy New Year, and let's get started. And when you now say, I need to discuss something more, feel free to contact me anytime. So first, when you watch me on YouTube, feel free to leave a like here, subscribe to my channel, and of course, feel free to leave a comment here. Also, feel free to leave a review here, also on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Very much appreciate to leave 5 stars there. Thank you very much for doing so. And recommend this video cast and podcast to your friends, family, podcast, online, offline, social media. Share it wherever you like. The more people we have listening to this, the better it will be. In addition to that, we have YouTube Shorts. Feel free to add YouTube Shorts. These are leadership tips, which we publish every single week. So be sure that you put the little bell when you follow my channel on YouTube, put a little bell on there so you get a short notification when we put new videos online, at least a video per week. So feel free to follow me there as well. Of course, you can follow me on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well, or go to my website, nb-networks.biz, and then you see what I do for a living with all my business services. The channel that most people still use, because they say, I have to discuss something, but it's very personal, it's very corporate thing, I can't put it into the comment section. feel free to contact me via email, nb@nb-networks.com. I'm looking forward to hearing from you there. And of course, we have live sessions. Go to expert.nb-networks.com, and then you will see anything you need there. Because when you put the email address in there, by the way, no worries, you only receive one email every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. More than 400 podcasts, video casts, article available in English, and of course also in the German language, so bilingually. And of course, all for free if you go via the expert letter. And in the expert letter, leadership letter, you find the date, time, and the access link to our live session. It's only published in the leadership letter, so no other access compared to that one. So, and also, of course, you can feel free to follow me on social media. So connect with me on LinkedIn, follow me on Instagram, like me on Facebook, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. The most important thing, by the way, if you contact me on any of these channels, I answer every single message within 24 hours or less. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you there. The final thing that I always say is always the most important one. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive aspect that you obviously want to see in your life, in your project, in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. At the end of this podcast, as well as at the end of this video cast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.